Welcome to Reformed Thinking. So imagine trying to survive a freezing winter when the temperature outside drops, well below zero.
Right, pretty miserable.
Yeah, and your entire city is running on maybe one-third of its normal electrical grid. There is no reliable heat pumping into the apartment buildings.
Oh, wow.
The generators at the local hospital are sputtering because diesel is running low, and the municipal water pumps are failing because they simply don't have the juice to maintain pressure.
That is a terrifying scenario.
It is. Now, imagine the cause of that catastrophe for a second. The weapon that initiated this whole cascade of failure wasn't a physical bomb dropped from a stealth bomber.
Right, no explosions.
Right. It wasn't an artillery shell. It was a silent line of malicious code, just injected into a network from a server thousands of miles away by someone whose identity you might never definitively prove.
Yeah, and that scenario is not, it's not some hypothetical thought experiment.
No, it's not.
It is the very real, very present reality of modern conflict. It forces us to confront a completely new category of vulnerability, really. We are looking at a situation where the architecture of civilian life is weaponized from the shadows.
And that brings us to our mission for this deep dive.
Yeah.
Because we have two source materials in front of us today, and on the surface, they look like they belong on completely different planets.
They really do.
The first one is this highly technical 2026 geopolitical analysis. It breaks down the grim reality of cyberkinetic warfare, specifically analyzing the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And it looks at this concept military strategists are calling Murky Attribution.
Right. And then the second source is a rigorous academic theological treatise written by a Reformed theologian.
Right, a huge shift in tone.
A massive shift. This paper conducts a linguistic and theological analysis of Psalm 64,
Right.
which is, an ancient text written by King David. The author makes the case that David's ancient struggle against these hidden, whispering conspirators in his own court perfectly mirrors the psychological and spiritual pathology of modern state-sponsored digital attacks.
So we are going to synthesize these two texts today. For you listening, we want to understand how the geopolitical crisis of digital anonymity is, at its core, a manifestation of human depravity.
Spot on.
And we want to examine how absolute deterrence against these kinds of hidden attacks relies upon the sovereign, omniscient justice of the Almighty. So let's just jump into the geopolitical reality first.
Sounds good.
The 2026 analysis starts with a major assertion about the shift in how nations wage war. The core argument is that modern conflict no longer relies solely on seizing and holding physical territory.
Right. The traditional map of warfare involves drawing red and blue lines, taking a hill, securing a river crossing, pushing the enemy back.
Classic battlefield stuff.
Yeah. But the new primary target is the infrastructure that makes civilian life breathable.
Breathable. That specific word choice from the author carries so much weight.
It really captures the stakes. We are talking about the underlying systems that allow a modern society to draw a breath. Electricity, heat, the banking sector, hospitals.
Satellite communications, too.
Yes, and basic municipal services like water and trash collection. The geopolitical analysis argues that cyber operations have become central to modern conflict because they target the critical seams between all those physical systems.
I think we need to look at the specific data provided in the text, just because the numbers clarify the sheer scale of this strategy.
The numbers are staggering, yeah.
The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission issued a report tracking the destruction. Between March 22 and August 31st of 2024, they recorded 9 massive, coordinated Russian waves against Ukrainian electricity infrastructure.
9 waves.
Yeah, and these operations hit 20 out of Ukraine's 24 regions.
The resulting damage was catastrophic. Those summer waves destroyed approximately 9 gigawatts of generation capacity.
Which is hard to visualize.
It is. To give some perspective on what a gigawatt means, a single gigawatt can supply electricity to roughly 750,000 homes.
Oh, wow.
So you are talking about wiping out the capability to keep millions of people warm and safe.
And the International Energy Agency noted that this was just the summer campaign. An additional 9 gigawatts were already lost earlier in the spring 2024 wave.
It's just relentless.
Right. So by the time those attacks concluded, Ukraine's total electrical grid was reduced to roughly 1/3 of its pre-war capacity.
Think about that. You have a modern industrialized nation attempting to keep its economy, its healthcare system, and its citizens alive on a fraction of the electricity it requires.
It touches every single aspect of civilian survival. Now, the geopolitical source is clear that cyber operations didn't create all of that damage in isolation.
No, definitely not. A significant portion of that destruction was accomplished through physical kinetic strikes, drones, and missiles hitting substations.
Yeah, but the digital intrusions and the physical explosives were integrated to achieve the same coercive strategy.
Right. Organizations like Google's Threat Analysis Group and Mandiant observed the specific tactics used in the digital realm. The attackers were utilizing built-in administrative tools, deploying wiper malware.
Which just erases everything.
Everything. And they were disguising their destructive payloads as standard ransomware. The text stresses that the objective here is not a temporary disruption of services.
Right. The true objective is psychological coercion.
They want to make ordinary daily life unreliable, terrifying, and cold. The strategy is to apply so much pressure to the civilian population that the state is forced to concede.
This makes me think of the difference in how we perceive injury. Like, I would compare conventional warfare to breaking a bone.
Okay.
It is violent, it is entirely obvious, the trauma is localized, and anyone looking at an X-ray can see the jagged line.
Right.
But cyber warfare operates like injecting a synthetic toxin into the bloodstream that silently shuts down the central nervous system.
That's a really good analogy.
You don't see the structural damage on the outside. There is no crater. But the body stops functioning all the same. Which leads me to ask, if the physical damage from conventional missiles is so vast and undeniable, why do these military analysts place such an incredible amount of weight on the digital intrusions?
Because the digital realm provides a massive tactical advantage, which is ambiguity.
Ambiguity.
Yeah. A physical missile leaves a debris field. It has a clear physical trajectory that defense radar can track back to a specific launch site, often pointing directly to a known military base.
You can point a finger right away.
Right. Digital intrusions, however, expand the battlefield straight into the living rooms of civilians while retaining enough deniability to complicate retaliation. The physical missile is obvious. The digital intrusion creates a debilitating crisis of attribution.
And the geopolitical source introduces a specific phrase for this: murky attribution.
Murky attribution, yes.
So if I am trying to visualize this, a state-sponsored hacker is not just sitting at a desk in a government intelligence building and sending a direct attack to a foreign electrical grid. They're creating a labyrinth.
A labyrinth is a highly accurate way to describe it. Digital attackers go to extraordinary lengths to hide their origins. They route their payloads through compromised third-party machines located in neutral countries.
Just bouncing the signal all over the place?
Yeah, they borrow coding tools and malware signatures from other known groups to throw investigators off the scent.
And they use criminal affiliates. The text mentions a GRU disruptive playbook tracked by Mandiant that specifically uses hacktivist personas.
That is a critical tactic. A state intelligence agency will create or co-opt a persona that looks like a decentralized group of independent, politically motivated hackers.
Like a fake grassroots group?
Yes. They use these personas to amplify the psychological terror of an attack while drastically lowering the detection risks for the state itself. They maintain plausible deniability.
They create a scenario where the digital evidence is scattered across foreign jurisdictions, private corporate server logs, and various cloud providers.
And the attacker hides in the sheer volume of everyday internet traffic. They blend their weaponized code into the background noise of ordinary glitches and standard criminal activity.
Which brings us to a specific example. The geopolitical source provides an emblematic case study that illustrates this crisis of murky attribution perfectly, the Viasat KASA attack.
That is a fascinating case.
This took place on February 24th, 2022.
The opening day of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Right. And the timeline of the attack is really telling. It occurred precisely 1 hour before Russian forces physically crossed the border.
The technical mechanics of the attack are highly revealing. It was a ground-based intrusion into a trusted management segment of the Viasat network.
So they got inside the management system?
Yeah. The attackers sent a wiper command that effectively bricked the consumer-oriented broadband modems for several thousand customers inside Ukraine.
Bricked them, just turned them into useless plastic.
Literally useless.
Yeah.
But the collateral damage was immense, knocking out tens of thousands of additional modems across the European Union.
So you have a massive disruption of satellite communications right as a kinetic war begins. But the crucial detail the source highlights is the timeline lag in figuring out who did it.
Right, the timeline is key.
The attack happened in late February. Viasat, the private company, took weeks to explain the technical mechanism of the wiper malware. And even then, they didn't name a state actor.
No, they didn't.
The formal political attribution by the European Union, the public condemnation, did not occur until May of 2022.
And that 3-month lag is the foggy window that modern attackers exploit.
3 whole months.
Right. If a defending nation or a defensive alliance relies on gathering immediate courtroom-quality proof before taking retaliatory action, the attacker gains a massive strategic advantage.
They get exactly what they want.
Spot on. They achieve their tactical goal of shutting down communications during an invasion, while responsibility remains publicly contested and debated for months.
And this fog is compounded by a concept the source calls the dual-use dilemma. Civilian infrastructure is highly interconnected with military operations. They are not separate networks anymore.
An electricity grid is the perfect example. It supplies electricity to a neonatal unit in a civilian hospital, but that exact same grid also supplies energy to a railway moving troops to the front line.
And defense factories.
Right, factories producing ammunition and air defense systems protecting the city. The satellite broadband network serves local fire departments and rescue workers, but it also provides communication links for military units in the field.
So the aggressor can step up to the international microphone and claim they were targeting a military enabler?
Yes.
They can claim a legitimate military necessity under international law while simultaneously inflicting mass civilian suffering and plunging entire cities into freezing darkness.
It is incredibly cynical.
It is. But I find myself questioning the viability of the whole system here. If evidence is always scattered across foreign jurisdictions, if it sits in private corporate logs that governments might not even have access to, and if attackers constantly spoof their IP addresses and use criminal proxies, is the entire concept of state responsibility fundamentally flawed?
That's the big question.
Like, are defending nations always just guessing in the dark?
Well, the author of the geopolitical paper argues that defenders are not completely in the dark, but the framework for response has to shift radically. Murky attribution doesn't make deterrence impossible. It makes simple punishment-based deterrence entirely inadequate.
Okay, unpack that difference.
Sure. Classical deterrence is a relatively straightforward concept. It relies on the threat of immediate punishment. If you strike my territory, I see you strike my territory, and I strike you back with overwhelming force.
Like the Cold War nuclear standoff.
Precisely. But that classical model completely falls apart when attribution is delayed or contested by proxy groups. If you don't know who hit you for 3 months, you cannot launch a reciprocal strike the next morning.
Right, the moment has passed.
Which requires defense policy to shift toward a layered defense model. The foundation of this new model is deterrence by denial.
Deterrence by denial.
Yeah. Instead of simply threatening punishment after the attack succeeds, you make the target so incredibly difficult to break that you deny the attacker the easy tactical win they're looking for.
And the source outlines 6 specific layers of this earthly deterrence model. Let's walk through how a modern state builds this kind of defense. The first layer is resilience.
Resilience is about hardening systems long before a failure occurs. The text highlights a Congressional Research Service report regarding Ukraine's electric grid operators.
Right.
The grid survived not just because they had advanced firewalls or sophisticated software, but because of human resilience and operator familiarity with Russian cyber tactics. The personnel practiced rigorous cyber hygiene.
The text also notes the crucial role of manual override controls.
Yes, that is the ultimate form of deterrence by denial.
It's so low-tech, but effective.
Absolutely. If an attacker spends months crafting sophisticated malware to shut down a digital control network, but an engineer in a hard hat can physically walk out to the substation and manually pull a massive lever to reroute the electricity.
The attack fails.
Right. The attacker is denied the cascading failure they intended to cause.
I think of it like a homeowner who lives in a neighborhood where the police response time is terrible and the burglars wear masks and use stolen cars.
That's a good way to look at it.
The homeowner knows the police might not catch the burglar after the fact. So instead of relying solely on the threat of an arrest to deter the crime, the homeowner takes a different approach. They install reinforced steel doors, shatterproof windows, motion sensor cameras, and organize a vigilant neighborhood watch.
Right.
They make the house such an exhausting, difficult target that the burglar simply gives up.
And that leads right into the second layer, which builds on that preparation. Evidence architecture.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, a defending nation cannot wait until a blackout happens to figure out how to collect digital evidence. They have to pre-position logging systems, establish forensic protocols, and secure data storage before a crisis hits. You need the architecture in place to capture the footprints of the intruders while they're inside the network.
Then we move to the third layer, which is coalition attribution.
In the realm of murky attribution, a single state pointing a finger at an adversary can be easily dismissed by the international community as biased propaganda.
Just he said, she said.
Right. But when a massive coalition speaks with one voice, it carries undeniable diplomatic weight. The source points to the July 2025 NATO statement condemning Russian malicious cyber activities.
Okay.
By releasing coordinated statements, the coalition distributes the diplomatic risk and establishes a broadly accepted international consensus regarding the pattern of malicious behavior.
And then the fourth layer is where the strategy becomes highly proactive. The source calls it consequences without a smoking gun. This feels like a major shift away from waiting for absolute certainty.
It is a massive shift. Instead of waiting for perfect courtroom-quality proof linking one specific blackout to a specific state leader, defenders target the enabling ecosystems that make the attacks possible.
The ecosystems.
Yeah. If an intelligence agency observes that a particular threat group repeatedly utilizes certain server hosting companies, uses specific financial front companies to launder cryptocurrency, or hides behind particular Telegram personas, the defenders take action against those assets.
So they expose the infrastructure, slap economic sanctions on the front companies, or use their own cyber capabilities to disrupt those servers based on the accumulated pattern of behavior over time.
Yes, you degrade their ability to operate, even if you can't put a single hacker in handcuffs.
The fifth layer focuses on norm enforcement.
This involves keeping the international conversation focused intensely on the humanitarian angle. When an attack hits a hospital or a civilian energy grid, the defending state must relentlessly highlight the civilian harm to make the moral issue clear to the global community, applying diplomatic pressure regardless of who pulled the digital trigger.
And the final layer of earthly deterrence is restraint.
Restraint is crucial to avoid reciprocal escalation that spirals out of control. A defending nation must avoid lashing back with destructive cyber attacks just for the sake of looking tough.
Right. No knee-jerk reactions.
Exactly. I mean, absolutely. The response must be highly disciplined, backed by whatever evidence is available, and designed to preserve the strongest retaliatory options for the most grave attacks. The focus remains heavily on aiding the victimized infrastructure as a form of counterpressure against the attacker's goals.
We have spent quite a bit of time outlining the secular, policy-driven response to the crisis of murky attribution. This entire layered defense model is essentially a massive, complex system built to manage the fundamental limits of human sight.
We can't see everything.
Right, we build thicker digital walls because we cannot see clearly through the fog of war. But here is where the concepts in our two sources intersect in a fascinating way.
This is the pivot.
Yeah. The 2026 Defense Policy Paper shows us how modern states struggle with hidden attackers. The academic theological treatise demonstrates that the psychology of the hidden attacker and the illusion of anonymity was diagnosed over 3,000 years ago.
The theologian points out that human forensics will always leave a margin of doubt. But Scripture addresses the root pathology of the human heart that drives these concealed attacks.
So we're moving from the situation rooms of modern defense ministries to the ancient court of King David.
Specifically looking at his writings in Psalm 64.
Let's establish the historical and political context of this ancient text. David was a warrior king, but the theological source highlights that in this specific situation, he was not facing an open battlefield army.
He was not standing on a ridge looking down at Philistine chariots or massed infantry formations.
Right.
The threat he faced was internal and deeply concealed. He was dealing with a highly sophisticated network of domestic traitors.
Right under his nose.
Yeah. These conspirators were utilizing whispered slanders, backroom political treaties, and invisible ambushes to undermine his throne.
The author notes that the political reality of David's court was one of systemic, asymmetric betrayal. The weapons being deployed against him were not iron swords or physical spears.
No, the weapons were manipulated information, carefully constructed rumors, and character assassination designed to destroy the moral authority of the king without ever inviting an open physical confrontation.
And the theologian draws a direct structural parallel between the dynamics of that ancient court and the modern cyber warfare theater.
In both scenarios, the aggressor actively rejects the boundaries of open, declared engagement. They choose to target the vulnerable from a position of calculated, remote safety.
This is where it gets really interesting. The theological source provides a rigorous linguistic analysis of the specific Hebrew vocabulary King David used in Psalm 64.
And the parallels to modern murky attribution are striking. The text says the attackers operate in a sod.
Assad, S-O-D.
Yes, sod translates to a secret council or a hidden cabal. It carries a rich double meaning in the original language.
Okay, what does it mean?
It refers both to an intimate, confidential assembly of people behind closed doors and to the secret, malicious plan formulated within that room. The wicked are operating as a deep state conspiracy, entirely hidden from public view.
David also writes that they shoot from Bamisterum.
Bamisterum refers to secret, dark hiding places. The word is plural, which the theologian argues highlights the multiple, complex layers of concealment the attackers utilize.
They don't just hide behind one wall.
Right, they hide behind a labyrinth of shadows.
But the most compelling linguistic point the author brings out is the distinction in ancient weaponry, specifically regarding the weapon of distance. The text contrasts the cherub and the chets.
The cherub is the sword. The nature of a sword requires face-to-face physical proximity.
It's an inherently visible weapon.
Exactly. Absolutely. To strike an enemy with a sword, you have to step into the light, close the physical distance, and look your opponent in the eye. You accept the mutual risk of open combat.
But the chets is different.
The chets is the arrow.
A projectile explicitly designed for maximum distance and maximum concealment.
An archer can hide in a dense thicket or crouch behind a rocky ridge and launch a lethal strike without ever exposing themselves to the victim's line of sight.
The victim feels the impact of the weapon without ever seeing the face of the attacker.
And the theologian makes the compelling argument that malicious cybercode is the modern manifestation of the ancient arrow.
That makes perfect sense.
It allows a state-sponsored actor to strike a civilian electrical grid across the globe while remaining physically insulated from the theater of conflict, sitting in a comfortable room thousands of miles away.
That raises an interesting question regarding how we read ancient texts. Does the theologian imply that King David was somehow granted a prophetic vision of fiber optic cables and the internet? Or is this text revealing a consistent underlying pathology of human rebellion that transcends all eras of technology?
The author is unequivocal that it is the latter. The source insists that we must look past the superficial differences in the tools, whether it is a wooden bow or a digital network, to see the identical spiritual pathology driving the behavior.
It's a human heart issue.
Driven by what Reformed theology terms the total depravity of the will, fallen humanity consistently utilizes tools of distance and concealment to escape immediate earthly accountability. The human heart naturally gravitates toward the darkness to plot violence.
That brings us directly into the psychology of the attacker, which the treatise unpacks by analyzing verses 5 and 6 of the psalm. David describes the overwhelming arrogance of the aggressor.
They coordinate traps. The Hebrew word used is moksham. And as they lay these traps, they boast to themselves, "Who shall see them?"
Who shall see them?
It is a state of atheistic self-confidence. The text notes that these conspirators take immense pride in their own analytical and forensic capabilities.
They think they are the smartest people in the room.
Oh, without a doubt. The Hebrew root word chapash means to search out, to examine, or to investigate with intense, meticulous scrutiny. The wicked boast that they have accomplished a diligent search.
They firmly believe that their operational security is absolute, their network mapping is comprehensive, and their trap placement is entirely flawless.
It is the exact mindset of a highly skilled modern hacker who relies on layers of encrypted proxy servers routed through neutral nations using spoofed IP addresses. They convince themselves they are entirely invisible.
They remind me of a young child playing hide-and-seek, like throwing a thin blanket over their head in the middle of the yard and assuming that because their own vision is obscured, the blazing sun above cannot see them.
That's a spot-on analogy.
It is an atheistic self-delusion of the highest order.
They fall into that delusion because they confuse the patience of God with divine ignorance. They assume that because a lightning bolt of judgment hasn't struck them the moment they hit the execute command, the eye of the omniscient one does not behold their actions.
They believe the fog of murky attribution extends all the way to the throne of heaven.
But the theological treatise heavily contrasts this human search, this chapash, with the instantaneous, piercing attribution of God. And here the author brings in a theological document referencing the Westminster Confession of Faith, chapter 5, section 1.
Let's unpack that.
The confession articulates the doctrine of providence. It states that God, the great creator of all things, upholds, directs, disposes, and governs all creatures, actions, and things, from the greatest even to the least, by his most wise and holy providence.
When you apply that doctrine to the digital battlefield, the implication is staggering.
It really is.
It means that God has already indexed every single malicious line of code ever written. He knows every encrypted proxy server, every spoofed IP address, every shadow persona, and every hidden financial transaction used to fund the attack.
There is absolutely no such thing as murky attribution in the court of heaven.
None at all.
God's attribution is not delayed by 3 months while investigators pore over server logs. It is instantaneous, absolute, and flawless. And this theological reality leads to the structural turning point of Psalm 64.
The sudden, catastrophic reversal of the conspirators' plot.
The phrase in the Hebrew text is Wayoram Elohim,
Which means
but God shall shoot them.
the structural symmetry that David uses in the Hebrew text is devastating. The wicked spent their time in the dark, meticulously bending their bow to shoot an arrow in secret at the innocent. But in response, God launches a sudden arrow of his own,
That's Batum.
a sudden sovereign counterstrike. God does not need to gather a coalition or issue a diplomatic warning. His justice is swift and inescapable. And the result of that divine arrow is described with the word weyakshiluhu, meaning their own sharpened tongues, their own sophisticated devices, are turned into the very instrument of their downfall.
The text says their own tongue falls upon themselves, causing all who look upon them to flee away in terror. The intricate trap they spent months designing becomes the mechanism of their own destruction.
So structurally, the psalm moves us from the hidden, suffocating darkness of a secret cabal straight into the blinding, terrifying light of public, inescapable justice.
That's the trajectory, yes.
The source then takes this entire framework, the hidden conspiracy, the illusion of anonymity, and the sudden divine reversal, and applies it to the New Testament, specifically looking at Christological fulfillment.
The theologian operates from the premise that every text of Scripture is fundamentally Christocentric. Therefore, Psalm 64 finds its definitive, ultimate historical realization in the life and death of Jesus Christ.
Christ is presented in the paper as the ultimate Tam.
Yes, the blameless, perfect covenant keeper who walked in absolute, unblemished integrity before God and man.
And the presence of absolute light provoked the ultimate conspiracy of darkness. The religious and political leaders of the day, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Roman governor Pontius Pilate, function as the ultimate secret cabal, the ultimate sod.
They could not defeat Christ in honest, open debate in the temple courts. So they resorted to the tools of the hidden arrow.
They utilized illegal midnight trials held in secret away from the crowds.
They used 30 pieces of silver paid in the shadows to secure a betrayer. They orchestrated false witnesses. They firmly believed that their complex political maneuvering insulated them from moral accountability.
By routing their murderous conspiracy through the administrative proxy of the Roman Empire to maintain plausible deniability.
Right. They stood in the dark and mockingly thought, "Who shall see us?" But the treatise presents the crucifixion and the subsequent resurrection as the ultimate cosmic reversal. On the cross, God executed his own sudden counterstrike against the powers of darkness. The source references Colossians 2.15, detailing how God spoiled principalities and spiritual authorities, making a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it.
The very ambush designed by Satan and wicked men to destroy the Son of God became the exact ordained mechanism of their own cosmic defeat.
The resurrection was the sudden arrow that shatters the dominion of death forever.
The theological application of this ancient dynamic to our contemporary hyperdigital moment is incredibly sharp. The expert specifies that the source firmly rejects materialist secular frameworks for understanding human conflict.
Yes. The author specifically names liberal theology and critical race theory as frameworks that fail because they reduce human conflict to mere material control dynamics, economic disparities, or structural sociology.
The theologian's perspective is that those secular frameworks entirely miss the metaphysical root of the conflict.
The text argues that the root cause of a state-sponsored hacker shutting down a hospital grid is not a lack of digital governance, an imbalance in international relations, or economic disparity.
The root cause is the total depravity of the human heart.
Yes. Fallen man actively rebels against his creator, continually plotting violence in the dark because he inherently hates the light.
The author also maintains a strict dispensational distinction regarding how the church should respond. The church's weapons are strictly spiritual: the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit, the preaching of the word.
Right. The church's trust must reside entirely in divine providence, not in earthly geopolitical borders, military alliances, or technological parity.
But I have to push back on that application for a moment.
Okay, go ahead.
If heavenly justice is absolutely guaranteed, if God's sudden arrow will strike every hidden conspirator, shouldn't earthly governments just disarm, dismantle Cyber Command, and let God sort out the hackers?
The theologian anticipates that exact objection by clarifying the Reformed view of secondary causes. According to this theological framework, earthly governments are instituted by God and possess a distinct moral duty to defend their citizens from harm.
So they still have a job to do.
Oh, absolutely. They're required to utilize all those earthly defensive layers we discussed earlier, building resilience, establishing evidence architecture, forming defensive coalitions. Governments must yield the sword to restrain evil.
But the believer's ultimate peace cannot rest in those human technologies.
Correct. Human deterrence will always be limited by the fog of war. True peace rests only in the absolute certainty of God's sovereign decree and his flawless moral government.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, bridging two wildly different perspectives on conflict. We started with the cold, harsh reality of destroyed energy grids in Eastern Europe, examining the intricate policy struggles of attributing digital crimes across international borders.
And we moved all the way back to an ancient king's prayer that diagnoses the pathology of the hidden attacker and guarantees the inescapable justice of God.
We saw how the geopolitical reality of murky attribution creates a landscape where conventional punishment fails, requiring a complex, layered defense by denial.
And we saw how the theological reality of divine omniscience guarantees that no hidden action, no matter how encrypted, escapes the sudden arrow of Yahweh's judgment.
Which brings us back to that X-ray machine we talked about at the beginning. In the realm of international cyber warfare, the X-ray is blurry.
Very blurry.
The muddy waters of spoofed IPs, proxy servers, and hacktivist personas make it incredible.
The human search will always leave a margin of doubt. The divine search is entirely flawless.
And the source leaves us with a challenging, intensely introspective application for our own lives. We often view these massive geopolitical conflicts as something distant, a problem for military generals and international diplomats.
But the spiritual pathology of the Sod, the hidden cabal, exists in every human heart.
We live in an era where you might rely on private browsers, encrypted messaging devices, or the anonymity of a digital avatar for your own hidden habits. You might sit alone behind a glowing screen in a dark room, confident in your own operational security, assuming in your heart, "Who shall see me?"
It is the exact same self-deceptive delusion of the ancient conspirators plotting against the king.
So we leave you with this final thought to mull over. How does the absolute certainty that the Almighty instantly indexes every secret action, every hidden search, and every concealed motive reshape the way you will pick up and use your devices tomorrow morning?
A remarkably sobering question for a digital age.
Thank you for joining us on Reform Thinking. Until next time.